So I'm excited to introduce our next speaker. I'll step a little bit out of the way so you can get ready. We'll be talking about, this will be Sherilynn Black. She is an assistant professor of medical education and the director of the Office of Biomedical Graduate Diversity, with a particular focus in her own research on STEM-related work. So her talk will be on creating momentum around diversity initiatives in a biomedical research training, which is relevant, obviously, to all of us. So thanks for joining us.
Okay, first of all, my talk is not about HIV. I just want to get that out of the way. So as we're going through, I just want to say this is going to be a talk of a very different nature. But I'm very glad that I was asked to speak today because we're going to talk about diversity, which is something that I think is relevant for all of your research, for all of the patients you might work with, and for all programmatic initiatives that you have moving forward. And hopefully some of the things that I share with you today may be relevant for some of the programs, departments, and initiatives that you may be involved in. So as scientists and clinicians, there's a lot of data that shows that having diverse communities actually improves the quality of science. And there's a lot of reasons why this has been shown to be the case. One of which that's very clear is that when you have lots of diverse methodologies, lots of diverse mindsets and backgrounds, there's more innovation that's immediately accessible to collecting data and thinking about things in an innovative way. And if any of you are interested in the scholarship behind this, one of the people that's a leader in this group is Scott Page, who's done a lot of seminal work showing that when you use diverse populations to solve a problem compared to people that are similar but are equally high achieving, the diverse populations will always outperform the similar populations of individuals. However, as we know from a societal standpoint, there are many barriers to creating diverse groups. And we see that whether we're at Duke, whether we're at another institution, this is a societal issue where we're constantly striving to broaden participation in the sciences. And this could be racial ethnic diversity, this could be sexual orientation diversity, this could be religious, this could be the part of the country you're from, what your academic background is. All of these things are important to make sure we have the strongest scientific enterprise that we can. Some of the things that do create barriers here are some social science terminology you may or may not be familiar with. Issues called imposter syndrome, where some underrepresented individuals may feel that they don't belong in a certain environment. Lack of cultural awareness from people who have maybe not been exposed to many diverse individuals. Lack of self-efficacy, which is tied to imposter syndrome, but sort of you internalizing the belief that you cannot do something because other people may assume you can't do it. Lack of role models. I know that the person who spoke just before me was talking about having different types of individuals of different races and different patient populations. And if the patients don't see doctors that mirror them or see scientists that mirror them, they may not feel comfortable participating in studies. Oftentimes for trainees, there are small cohort numbers, and that can lead to feelings of isolation and also lack of engagement in the scientific community. So this sounds very depressing, right? And it sounds like a huge hurdle, which it is. But in 2010, the School of Medicine decided that they wanted to approach this head on. And that's when I came on board, which I'll talk a little bit about on the next slide. But during that process, I actually collected a lot of data across all of the departments in the School of Medicine for the basic sciences to really examine what are the actual diversity challenges that we face as a scientific community at Duke. And what I really found was sort of the most pervasive role here was that there were lots of people who were very willing to discuss this and saw the value, but didn't necessarily know a role that they themselves could play in improving the situation. So back in 2010, the School of Medicine was not what NIH would consider to be an exemplary example of how to sort of have a diverse space for science and for medicine. In the Ph.D. programs, we had about 8% underrepresented students, which is well below the national average of 13% that NIH is expecting. And the low numbers that we had led to lots of national scrutiny. A lot of our training grants, which many students are funded on, were on probation because this diversity is a metric that's counted on training grants. We were having problems recruiting and retaining individuals because the climate was so non-diverse in that space. And also, when I surveyed a lot of the students who were here and a lot of the trainees, they sort of expressed that they saw the value in the sciences at Duke, but did not feel that they were really included in the community in a way that made them feel like they had ownership or awareness in that space. So The leadership of the School of Medicine sort of had this hypothesis, which was, instead of creating a transient model, we're going to create a permanent administrative unit that specifically focuses on diversity for the sciences. And this will be something that will incorporate and sustain effective practices in the graduate departments and programs. And so I have called this the most awkward strategy, which is basically the full community cohort engagement model. And it's clunky, but it really is the only way that I can explain what it is, which is basically that everyone here has a role in the diversity conversation in science and medicine. Instead of sort of having the initiative siloed, I've really worked to create a comprehensive infrastructure for the departments, for the programs, for all of the students and faculty and staff, where everyone at every level can play a role in making sure we're a more inclusive and accepting environment. This contributes to broad feelings of ownership and inclusiveness, and it complements a lot of the programs that are already going on. So this is actually one of the ways that I've been partnering with CFAR, is through having this full community cohort engagement where everyone is playing a role in increasing diversity on campus. So a little bit about the structure of my office. And this is something that I'm hoping some of this information may give you all some ideas for ways that we can partner even further than we're already partnering with CFAR. So I am the director. I'm a neuroscientist by training. So I work very closely with all of the faculty and students who are in the sciences on issues relating to diversity. And I also, as was mentioned earlier, do research on how to figure out which initiatives in diversity are effective, which ones actually work. And I also do some structural equation modeling that focuses on how to predictively evaluate if certain diversity interventions will be successful or not. Outside of the research piece, I have 4 main buckets that I sort of have all of the initiatives siloed into for purposes of keeping things straight. Funding and scholarship, administrative prominence and leadership, student engagement, professional development and scientific enhancement, and faculty engagement. So under funding and scholarship, one of the biggest things that I've learned is that there's a lot of money out there and a lot of motivated entities who would really like to see more diverse scientific enterprises across the board, but especially at Duke, and there's a lot of commitment at a lot of different levels. So the development office has been a phenomenal partner with my office, helping me to have funds to do my interventions and my programs, to help me have more accessibility and exposure so that we can continue to bring diverse individuals into our scientific departments. We also have a lot of partnerships with a lot of industry corporations who have ties to Duke, including Merck and Bayer and Burroughs Wellcome, the Trent Foundation, and also the National Institutes of Health, Howard Hughes, a couple of others, who also have a very vested interest in making sure the biomedical workforce reflects the patient population and the scientific goals that they seek to attain. The institutional support is a big part of what helps my office to function. There are a lot of cross partnerships between academia and industry. And something that I think CFAR does very well, but could always continue to do, is the research and dissemination around the sort of programmatic infrastructure that you have. As CFAR sort of works to grow and develop from its grant-based mechanisms, being able to understand what's working and what's not working in your enterprise is something that NIH views as critically important. And my office does a lot of work with sort of being able to tease apart which aspects of programmatic interventions are effective practices. Another thing that's come out of my office, which some of you may be aware of, is an IMSD program, which is funded by the National Institutes of Health. It's an initiative to maximize student development. And the goal of IMSD, which we call BioCore here, is to create an inclusive training space for trainees at the undergraduate and graduate levels, and also to provide resources for faculty who have an interest in creating more diverse workspaces. And there are 3 principal investigators. I'm one of them, and then Danny Lev and Julie Reynolds. We also have a postdoc program that started to really, again, focus on examining which diversity interventions are most effective, and also creating a space for us to have data-driven research coming out of the office by scientists that are interested in outreach and diversity interventions. And this is something that we've just been getting started, and we're right now the first institution in the country who has scientists that are examining these sorts of questions. And so far, it's been very successful, and it's something that a lot of other institutions are interested in modeling, so they can compare the research that's going on with practices as graduate education with some of the clinical and scientific work that's going on. So next, moving on to administrative prominence and leadership. One of the most important things that my office does is work to make sure that Duke is aligned with national diversity priorities. And again, I mentioned this earlier, but I partner with quite a few of the T32 grants that we have here, which many trainees are funded on, as well as lots of federal agencies and companies that exhibit effective diversity practices. Many cross-institutional collaborations exist. I know CFAR is a big part of partnering with lots of different groups around campus to build your bandwidth. But we also, and a big part of what we do is do a lot of recruitment practices that prioritize scientific excellence and cultural awareness. And this is just a list of some of the groups that my office partners with. You see that I have CFAR highlighted there. But really what this is to show you is that, broadening participation across the board really does take a community effort that goes both from the academic side of things, the clinical side of things, and from the programmatic side of things. And so CFAR has been a great partner in that way. A couple of pieces of data that have come out of some of the work from my office that I think is really wonderful is if you look at the pie graph for chart A, you can see here that we had a large percentage of training grants when my office first started that NIH had ranked as marginally acceptable or unacceptable practices for diversity. And B indicates that now, this is 6 years later, all of our training grants are deemed fully acceptable by NIH, which means that they see strong improvement in our diversity practices across the board. We've also started an institutional partnership program that lots of institutions are very interested in partnering with Duke that have a commitment to diversity, but also want to make sure that there's a rigor of scientific excellence. And so 18 institutions across the country that range from minority-serving institutions to other research ones are all partnering with Duke right now in different clinical capacities and scientific capacities to make sure that scientists of all different backgrounds are having the opportunity to be exposed to science here. And some of the institutions are in-state, some are out of state. It's a wide variety of different institutions. But one key thing about this partnership program is that each of the institutions involved is in a mutually beneficial relationship. So it's not just that we, Duke, are opening our doors and saying, look at all these great things that we have to offer. It's also really encouraging Duke faculty and students to reach out to other institutions and learn from their practices and learn different strategies and resources that they have been able to implement that have allowed them to broaden participation and also increase scientific excellence. There are also many recruitment practices that go on through my office. Many of you may have heard about some of these through your departments and programs, but we partner really heavily with the graduate school and a lot of clinical departments to travel to conferences that highlight the science for minority individuals. And we also do lots of programs on campus during recruitment weekends and things of that nature that really help to highlight programs like CFAR and the academic programs to make sure that viable candidates are well aware of all that Duke has to offer. After all the recruitment initiatives, we've seen a very sharp increase in the number of diverse individuals that have come to Duke since my office started. If you look at graph A, you can see the first 6 years are sort of bucketed there, very inconsistent numbers with applications from underrepresented individuals. You can see after the little red arrow there that there's been a pretty upward slope to the line of the number of minorities that have applied to Duke. And graph B shows that we've had a near doubling in the percentage of minority matriculants since my office started than before my office started. So the recruitment practices are definitely playing a significant role in increasing diversity on campus. Moving on to student engagement. One of the biggest things that I think has played a role in making Duke a more inclusive community in the sciences is that my office provides a space for diverse graduate students to really have a voice and to be able to be more fully integrated into the scientific community, and for students who are doing MD, PhDs into the clinical community. The students build a strong cohort for any student who values diversity, and we actually, I would say, numbers-wise, the office was designed to promote diversity and to bring in the minority students, but we actually have quite a few students who are from all backgrounds who just believe in the tenets of broadening participation, who are quite involved in the programs and outreach that we do. It provides a safe environment for students to voice concerns and find advocates, and also helps with increasing confidence, persistence, and success in the greater scientific community. And there are currently about 20 programs that run through my office at any given point throughout the year. They focus on 5 key areas. One of them is mentor-mentee engagement, working a lot with the faculty and students together, professional development, academic and scientific engagement, cohort formation and social engagement, and wellness and emotional health. And all of these areas are really important for student success and for students to thrive in the scientific environment. And the data shows that we have collected through our evaluators and assessors that the students exhibit elevated performances in labs, classes, and at milestone events after the inception of my office. Many more students are getting independent funding in their own fellowships. And many more students are interested in seeking positions in the biomedical workforce, in clinical programs, and in basic science programs as a result of the community that they found through my office. And many of the students also really speak about sort of wanting to give back and wanting to be more involved in the community. And I think that that's something that's very relevant for a lot of the population that CFAR is engaged with. And finally, for faculty engagement, one of the biggest challenges that I think a lot of institutions face is that they have a really hard time finding a way to get faculty out of the busy work schedules and workflows to sort of be able to focus on programmatic initiatives that pertain to things like diversity or student engagement or learning outcomes. So what I've really worked to do is develop a series of initiatives that really sort of meet faculty where they are, really respect the focus of the research that they're engaged in, but also make sure that they understand that as faculty, they are a very important part of the mentor pipeline to continue to broaden participation as science continues to grow and expand. And so I work a lot with the faculty on their own professional development of sort of how to train diverse trainees, how to make sure that if it's a clinician, making sure that they are more exposed to working with diverse patient populations, things of that nature, and really help them to see their role in the diversity conversation. You know, I always say that every single individual in this room in the world has some diversity story, whether it's where you're from or how you were raised or what you believe in. And each of those contributes to the scientific enterprise. And so a big part of bringing the faculty in is helping them to see that their role at Duke expands far beyond the research that they produce for the institution, but that they can set the climate and the tone of how we're viewed societally. And this is not for you to read, it's just to show you that the faculty have a wide range of options for programs they can engage in. And something that I think is really great is all of the faculty who work with my office are self-affiliated. Excuse me, none of them are appointed or forced, and 182 faculty have volunteered for my office over the last several years in our IMSD program. And I think that really shows the commitment of the scientists and the clinicians at Duke to make sure that we have inclusive spaces as we're working on our scientific enterprise. And so really what I wanted to sort of bring all this together to say is that all of these tenets are viable and important for a broader Duke. And, you know, the president's office, the provost's office work a lot with my initiatives, and a lot of different aspects of Duke are now beginning to sort of take some of these programs and expand them more broadly so that more individuals can have a voice and sort of feel that they're included in our community here. The new institutional strategic plan is actually incorporating some of these initiatives, and I've worked to make them so that they can be disseminated easily and rapidly so that different units and departments will have an opportunity to change some of the infrastructure at Duke. And something I think is very important is that a lot of the strategies are now beginning to get implemented to work towards recruiting diverse faculty and clinicians. And I think that especially if you're working with patient populations that have quite a few diverse individuals, again, having more diversity in that area is something that's very important. So to wrap it up, I will just say that all of these initiatives together have really made a lasting impact on improving the climate and the configuration of the scientists who are at Duke. I think that a lot of the data that's come from surveys and focus groups that we've done have really indicated that all students in the School of Medicine feel that they've been positively impacted by an increase in diversity. As I mentioned here, about 1/3 of all students are now applying for our IMSD program, which is wonderful because that's showing that, you know, this is not sort of a minority-centric issue, but it's something that's really important to our entire community. And many departments have begun to adopt these programs to work specifically with all grad students as opposed to having one specific group that gets the benefit of the programming. And one of the department chairs said that he really believes that diversity is now part of the fabric of the scientific culture at Duke. And I think that that's really something that NIH really believes in and thinks that we're doing a very strong job across the board of showing this fully comprehensive model of all of the institution valuing this process. And so with that, I would just like to thank two members of my staff are here, Devin Gillette, who's the director of our IMSD program, and Raquel Salinas, who is a postdoc and also the assistant director of the office. And I'm happy to take any questions that any of you have. Thank you. Questions?
Time that you started, I'm wondering what you would say would be the easiest change that you made, and if it was related to that rapid rise in the number of applications at Duke, and then what's been the hardest, and maybe something that you haven't quite achieved yet.
I think that the easiest change was giving the students a voice. I think that you know, when the School of Medicine first started my office, they sort of put out they just sort of said, we're starting a diversity office. And I did not indicate on that call who that included. I just said, anyone's welcome. And the first time I had a meeting of students, it was a very interesting group of students that showed up. There were students of all different backgrounds and cultures, and some students who just said, it's about time we have something like this at Duke. Some students who had really sort of had a lot of personal challenges. And I think really bringing that community together was something that actually ended up sort of synergistically coming together a lot more easily than I thought it would. I thought I would kind of have to sell why this was important, but at Duke, this actually was not the case. I think one of the harder things I've had to do was change the perception of Duke nationally. There have been a lot of things that have occurred, not in the School of Medicine, thankfully for some of them, but still nonetheless things that have really cast a light that Duke is not an institution that that values diversity or values broadening participation in the sciences specifically. And so thanks to all of these faculty affiliates and great students that we have, we've really been able to sort of make a national thumbprint now where Duke really has a strong voice and is viewed as a national leader in this area. But it's definitely taking time. And I would definitely say, too, the faculty and clinical diversity side of people in terms of, increasing numbers in that area is a whole different ballgame that I know Duke is really beginning to take a special interest in right now. And I think that that's going to take significant work to start changing that dynamic for the basic sciences and for the clinical departments.
Any other questions? One more if we... Okay, thank you very much,
Thank you very much.
Sherilynn.